It's been years now, maybe 5, since I last saw the old mill path. Years since I even dared to think about it, not really. But lately, it's been creeping back in, like a persistent chill you can't quite shake from your bones. I tell myself it's just a bad memory, a foolish mistake. But deep down, I know it was more. It was something else. It started innocently enough, as these things always do. I was an avid hiker back then, always looking for a new challenge, an untrodden path. I'd heard whispers about the old mill path, a forgotten logging trail tucked away in the sprawling Blackwood forest. Locals would grimace if you asked, muttering about it being closed or unsafe. No official signs, mind you, just a collective, uneasy silence. That, of course, only fueled my curiosity. It was late autumn, the air crisp and carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The sun was already low when I finally found the faint indentation in the undergrowth, barely visible behind a cluster of gnarled oaks. Almost immediately, the cheerful chatter of the main trail faded, replaced by an unnerving quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of deep woods, but a heavy, almost expectant silence, like the forest itself was holding its breath. The path twisted deeper, the trees growing denser, their branches interlocking overhead, turning the afternoon into perpetual twilight. The ground underfoot was soft with generations of fallen leaves, absorbing the sound of my boots. I found myself walking on tiptoe, though I couldn't say why. The air grew colder, clinging to me with an unnatural dampness that went beyond the season. Then I saw the first one. A tree, ancient and twisted, its bark stripped away in places, revealing patterns that looked less like natural growth and more like deliberate carvings. Not symbols, nothing legible, just jagged vertical lines, almost like claw marks, but too evenly spaced. I ran my hand over the rough wood. It felt strangely cold, almost clammy. A shiver traced its way up my spine, but I dismissed it as the chill of the woods. Further in, the silence deepened, becoming a presence. My own breathing sounded impossibly loud. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced I was being watched. The shadows seemed to stretch, twisting into unsettling shapes behind the thick trunks. I told myself it was just imagination, the result of too many ghost stories and the impending dusk. But then came the sound. Faint at first, like a distant rhythmic thumping. A dull, heavy pulse, deep within the earth, or perhaps within the trees themselves. I stopped, straining to hear it, but as soon as I focused, it would fade, only to resume once I started moving again. It was maddening, playing tricks with my perception. I noticed other things. Small, distorted effigies woven from twigs and twine, hanging from low branches like forgotten ornaments. They looked vaguely human, but with elongated limbs and twisted heads. And the trees. More of them bore those strange claw-like marks, some so deep they looked like open wounds. The air began to carry a new scent, subtle at first, then growing stronger, something metallic, like old blood, mixed with the damp decay of the forest floor. Panic began to coil in my gut. This wasn't just a forgotten trail. It felt like a forgotten place, a place where things lingered. The rhythmic thumping grew louder, closer. It wasn't in the earth. It was moving with me. I started to walk faster, then jog. My heart hammered against my ribs, echoing the strange pulse from the woods. I caught a glimpse of movement through the dense foliage to my left. Tall, impossibly thin, like a shadow stretched out of shape. I whipped my head around, but nothing. Just the unrelenting, oppressive trees. I tried to pull out my compass, but my hands were shaking too hard. The path ahead seemed to disappear, trees closing in, indistinguishable from the surrounding forest. I was truly lost now. The thumping was right behind me now, a low, guttural beat that vibrated in my chest. And then, a whisper, right in my ear. Not words, just a dry, rasping sound, like dead leaves skittering across stone. A flash of something white, something bone-like, in my peripheral vision. pure, unadulterated terror seized me. I didn't look back. I just ran, blindly, stumbling over roots, tearing through thorns, oblivious to the scrapes and bruises. I could feel the cold breath on my neck, the weight of unseen eyes. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed, until the oppressive silence finally broke, replaced by the faint, comforting sounds of a distant road. I burst out of the tree line, gasping, shaking, onto a dusty service road, collapsing in a heap. I got out. I did. But getting out didn't mean I was free. I tried to tell people, of course, my friends, my family. But the words, they just wouldn't form correctly. The disturbing images, the unsettling sounds, the raw terror. They all turned into vague descriptions, hesitant stammerings. My voice would trail off, or I'd find myself describing something completely innocuous. Their eyes would glaze over with polite concern, or they'd quickly change the subject. It was like I was speaking a language only I understood, or rather, a language that couldn't be understood. No one talks about it, I'd always thought, referring to the trail. But it's more than that. It's not just that people forget or ignore. It's that something prevents the memory from taking root, from being shared. It's like the trail itself is a living thing, and its very essence is forgetfulness, a slow erosion of what happened, so its secrets remain inviolable. And now, after all these years, the whispers have started again. Not just in my mind, but sometimes, late at night, I hear the faint, rhythmic thumping, distant at first, then growing closer, echoing the beat of my own faltering heart. I try to write it down, to describe it, just so I don't forget. But even now, the words feel elusive. The details blur like ink on wet paper. I find myself staring at the wall, struggling to recall the precise shape of those wicked-looking twig effigies, or the exact sound of that horrifying whisper. I got out. I swear I did. But why can't I remember the way back to my own house clearly sometimes? Why, when I look out my window at the trees, do their branches seem to beckon, not with leaves, but with long, thin fingers? And why, beyond the forgetting, beyond the terror, is there also this strange, undeniable pull? A silent, insistent call to return to the old mill path, the forgotten place that no one talks about, because it erases those who dare to remember. And I realize, with a cold dread that chills me to the bone, that I am slowly becoming one of them. You know, people always talk about the Appalachian Trail, or the Pacific Crest, the big ones, the ones with guidebooks and thousands of hikers. But the real stories, the ones that chill you to the bone, aren't on those maps. They're whispered about in forgotten little towns, about trails too old, too overgrown, or just too wrong for anyone to mention in polite company. I stumbled onto one such story, or rather, it stumbled onto me. It was a few years back, spring, unusually warm. I was in this tiny, dying town nestled deep in the Catskills, doing some research for a local history project. You know, old mills, forgotten farmsteads, that kind of thing. I spent a lot of time in the dusty town library, digging through old records and maps. That's where I found it, a hand-drawn map tucked into an antique property deed. It showed an old logging trail, unmarked on any modern map, winding deep into a section of forest locals vaguely referred to as the Hollow. The librarian, a gaunt woman named Martha, saw me looking at it. Her eyes, magnified by thick glasses, grew wide for a second. "Oh, that old thing," she mumbled, quickly looking away. "No one uses that anymore. Nothing out there." Nothing out there. That was my cue. The next morning, armed with a compass, a bottle of water, and a fully charged phone, optimism, I suppose, I found the trailhead. It wasn't marked, of course, just a barely discernible break in the thick undergrowth, a faint indentation in the earth that suggested generations of feet, or something heavier, had once passed through. The air was cool, damp, smelling of rich earth and pine. Sunlight dappled through the high canopy, and for the first hour, it was idyllic. Birds sang, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and the only sound was the crunch of my boots on the forest floor. But then, Things started to shift, subtly at first. The trail itself became narrower, the trees closing in, their bark seeming rougher, more gnarled than I'd ever seen. The birdsong faded, replaced by an unnerving silence. Not a peaceful silence, but a heavy, watchful one. My footsteps, once crisp, now sounded strangely loud, almost intrusive. I caught myself holding my breath, straining to hear something, anything, other than my own increasing heartbeat. About 2 hours in, I found the first oddity. A piece of tattered, dark fabric, caught on a low-hanging branch. It looked old, almost like burlap, but woven with something else. Something stiff and coarse, like animal hair. A chill prickled my arms, unrelated to the temperature. I moved on, telling myself it was nothing, just some old trapping material. Further on, the trees grew even stranger. Their branches tangled overhead, forming a dense, oppressive ceiling that barely let the sunlight through. The air grew colder, even though it was still early afternoon. And then I heard it. A faint, rhythmic creaking. It wasn't the wind. It sounded like old, stressed wood, but in an unnatural way, almost like strained joints. I stopped, listening, holding my breath again. The creaking stopped. I took another step, and it started again, just ahead, fading as I paused. It felt like the forest itself was groaning under some invisible weight. My gut screamed at me to turn back, but the historian in me, the part that wanted to uncover secrets, pushed me forward. The trail opened into a small clearing, eerily devoid of any undergrowth. In the center stood a single massive oak, its branches twisted and skeletal, reaching like grasping fingers. Tied to its lowest branch, swaying slightly in the non-existent breeze, was a crudely made doll. It was larger than any child's toy, maybe 3 feet tall, made of bundled sticks and wrapped in more of that dark, coarse fabric I'd seen earlier. Its head was a weathered piece of wood, carved with 2 empty holes for eyes and a wide, unnatural smile. That's when I smelled it. Something cloying and sweet, like decaying meat mixed with old, damp earth. And the creaking sound was louder here, coming from everywhere, from the very air around me. It was like the oak tree, the doll, the clearing. They were all breathing, groaning. Panic surged. This wasn't just an old trail. It was a place of worship? A trap? I didn't know, and I didn't want to find out. I turned, stumbling, heading back the way I'd come. My heart hammered against my ribs, and every snap of a twig, every rustle, sent jolts of pure terror through me. I ran, ignoring the scratches from the overgrown bushes, the tripping roots. The creaking pursued me, sounding closer now, sometimes accompanied by a soft, squelching sound, like something heavy dragging itself through mud. I didn't look back, I just ran. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed. I ran until the trees thinned, until I saw familiar sunlight, until I burst out of the woods and onto a dirt road, gasping for breath. I didn't stop until I saw my car, parked where I'd left it that morning. I fumbled with the keys, threw myself inside, and locked the doors, my hands shaking so violently I could barely start the engine. I drove, not looking back, not stopping until I was miles away, on the main highway, heading for home. It took days for the adrenaline to fade, weeks for the nightmares to subside. I never spoke about what I saw back there. No one would believe it, and I didn't want to sound insane. I just filed it away, a terrifying memory of a forgotten trail. Now, it's been a few years. I'm back in my own apartment, safe, miles from that mountain town. I'm telling you this because it's a story that needs to be told, even if it's only to you. Sometimes, when I'm alone, in the quiet of my living room, I still hear that creaking. I tell myself it's the old building settling, or pipes expanding. But lately, I've noticed something else. When I stretch, or shift position too quickly, my joints make this sound, not a normal pop or crack. It's that exact, distinct creaking, like old, stressed wood. And sometimes, When I've been sitting still for too long, I catch a faint, sweet, decaying scent, just like the one in the clearing. And then, I look down at my hands. My fingernails are long, slightly curved, and the skin around them, it's rougher than it used to be. Not calloused, but textured, like the bark of an old, gnarled tree. The kind of tree that stands in forgotten clearings, watching. The kind of tree that creaks.